Are you listening to us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or any other platform where you can leave a rate or review? Do you like what we're doing? If the answer to all of that is yes, please consider quickly giving us a 5-star rate. And if you wouldn't mind leaving us a nice review, we greatly appreciate that as well. Okay, let's do this.
Hello, welcome to the Ghosts of Harrenhal. My name's Simon.
And I'm Mackelly.
Thank you for joining us for episode 279 of our chapter-by-chapter book review of A Song of Ice and Fire by George Martin. Today we'll be discussing chapter 7 of A Dance with Dragons. That's John 2.
You know, when I say, and I'm Mackelly, I feel like I say it like immediately as you stop. But when I go back to editing, there's always this weird gap between you saying it and me saying it.
Yes, the gap between me and you is larger than the gap between you and me.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like as soon as you say my name's Simon, I say I'm Mackelly. I don't feel like I pause at all. So
yeah, and what's funny is I feel like you're just like a slow on the uptake lackwit who just can't keep up.
Maybe.
I mean, that's what I've concluded. That's why I've never made a big point of it. I didn't want to offend you.
I guess that must be it, because I don't have any better explanation. Anyway, we have a show to do, and as always, we're going to chat about the chapter and try not to spoil any future plot points for you, unless, of course, you have a Buy Me a Coffee Sustainer tier that includes spoilers. Then we are going to spoil things for you, but regardless, hopefully we'll provide you some entertainment along the way.
We'll summarise what happened, discuss our thoughts on it, provide some useful background, compare it to the television show, indulge in a little pedantry, and cover some relevant news and listener correspondence. Be sure to check out the show notes. They'll have some additional information about the characters, spelling, and geography of this chapter. How are you, Mackelly?
I'm doing well. It's a beautiful day outside today.
It's crazy beautiful.
I was out as much as I could.
Yeah. It's a little disconcerting because it was the first game of my competitive soccer season at work, which runs into like June and July, or Hell's Kitchen as it's called around here.
Right.
And it was already roasting playing today. So
yeah,
here in March, it was. I think my car read 88 Fahrenheit, which is
oh my goodness.
When I got in it, it cooled off once I started moving, but that's over 30 Celsius for the 12th of March. It's pretty good.
Yeah. Went out. We went on 3 walks today. Took the dog on 2 walks and did our usual morning walk. So trying to get out as much as I could.
Good for you.
Anyway.
And my soccer, we only had 7 players turn up. So the other team had like 14, but they have to play down to 9 players when there's a mismatch like this. So they played 9 against 7.
Oh, wow.
And we hung on for a while, and then we went 1-0 down. But then an 8th player arrived. So we were playing 9 against 8 from that point onwards. Would you believe we fought back and won 2-1?
Nice.
I know.
Short-handed, nonetheless.
Short-handed. It was really good. And not a bad team we were playing against either. It kind of worked for us because they were constantly having to substitute. So they were always in flux because they had so many subs, and they wanted to give everyone equal playing time. And on our side, I said before the game, I said, this is going to forge a team spirit right here.
Right. No breaks, no one get hurt.
Exactly. Hot day. And everyone played terrific. So, yeah, it was a fun day.
All right. Very bonding experience for the team.
Mm-hmm. So I have a funny story for you. So me and Carson went to have a drink with friends last week, and they texted us. They were at a place and they invited us to come along, and it took us a little bit to get going, but we texted them and said we're on our way, and they said, oh, we've moved bars to this other bar across the street.
Yeah. And
they said we prefer the beer in this other bar, and Carson texted back, disagree, but we'll see you there. They said the beer is better, and she said disagree, but we'll see you there. And her phone had attached to the car through Bluetooth, so when she sent that text, it came up that I'd received a text because I was on the thread, and I have a button to listen to the text, and it reads the text out, and it read the text out. Disagree, but we'll see you there. I was like, okay, fine. And so we got there. And this is one of the very few places in town where it's very difficult to park. It can be a real pain to park in this place. Uh-huh. And we drove right up to the door, just on the off chance, just hoping someone had just left.
Right.
And there was a space. and the space said loading zone till 5 p.m. and it was like 5:02 p.m.
Okay, you're in the clear.
I looked at Carson and I said, "Do you think we can?" And she said, "I think we can." I was like, "Do you think we can?" "I think we can." And just at that moment, the car said, "Disagree, but we'll see you there." It just read the text out again. It had already read it once. I never asked it to read it out. It just decided to chip into the conversation. Disagree.
You get me towed. You're going to be in trouble.
It cracked us both up. We're like, wow, the car's got an opinion.
Yeah.
My other story from this week was I didn't feel well Monday evening, and Tuesday I had a big presentation at work. And so I got a message to my manager to say I might not be able to do it.
Right.
But the next morning, Tuesday morning, I woke up and I felt fine. So I immediately got on with him and I said, "Look, I'm fine. I can do it. Don't cancel the meeting. I can be there." And he said, "Oh, give me a call." So we talked on the phone and he said, "Well, what happened?" I said, "Oh, just after dinner last night." No, sorry. I said, it's important what I said here. I said, just as I was cooking dinner, I started to feel unwell. And we finished the conversation. We're like, "All right, well, let's do the presentation in a little while." I was like, "Yeah, great, no problem." And just as I was signing off, a piece of paper slides in from the left. And Carson had written in big letters, "When you were cooking dinner."
She wants credit where credit's due.
I know. I took a photo of it and sent it to my manager, and I said, "Carson took exception to one of the things I said on the phone."
Let me clarify who was actually doing the cooking. Well, I was present for your presentation, and I thought you did a very good job, despite...
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Not being a little bit under the weather or so.
Yeah. No, I felt totally fine on Tuesday. I just felt bad on Monday night, and then but it cost me a lot of sleep. So Tuesday I was a bit of a zombie, but otherwise healthy.
All right. Well, it's good that you're healthy. Glad to hear it.
And which was good that I was healthy on Tuesday because we had Sustainer Call.
That we did. Yes, we did.
And it was really fun. I enjoyed that a lot.
Yeah, we'll talk about it in news and notes. It was.
Well, sorry if I jumped the gun. All right, then. Well, let's get down to business. How did we leave Jon Snow? Last time we saw Jon, he was falling out with King Stannis over the latter's desire to gift castles along the wall to his men. Stannis had learned that Gilly was the source of Jon's information, and Jon promised Stannis that he won't have to see her again. She's to be sent from the wall. Jon's alternate plan was to have his men command at the castles, but if Stannis would be willing to supplement with his own men, that would be lovely. Stannis didn't like to be thwarted, but relented. Melisandre walked with Jon and offered to share the names of his internal foes. He didn't need them. He already knows who his enemies are. Mackelly, why don't we find out who his enemies are? Give the summary of this one.
Yes, I have a feeling we might find out who his enemies are here. Well, Jon is poring over a letter that he won't sign his name to. The Night's Watch takes no part. Ed sends in Gilly. In turn, Jon sends Ed to find Sam while he talks with Gilly. She kneels. He explains that is not necessary. She only has to kneel to the king. He asks about the babies. They're both doing well. He has something hard to tell her, though. She guesses that it's about Mance. She's on Val's side and wants Mance spared. It's not about Mance, but her petitions wouldn't work anyway. He broke his vow. It's about Mance's son. Now Gilly is scared. The baby really has done nothing wrong. Don't let her burn him, she entreats. Only Gilly can do that, and Jon explains how.
She begs him for something different. She could take both babes. No, the Queen's men would chase them down, and Dalla's baby would burn along with Gilly for trying to thwart them. He makes her hold her own hand over a candle so that she can know how painful the baby's death would be. He'll find a wet nurse for her own child, raise him safely, teach him to read and write, and tell him the truth when he's old enough. Then he can come and find Gilly, and he will not let Melisandre burn him. She wouldn't have a reason to anyway. He has no royal blood, and burning innocents is a surefire route to mutiny.
Jon thinks to himself, kill the boy, meaning the boy within himself, not kill the baby.
Yeah, it'd be unfortunate if he voiced that in front of Gilly at this moment, I feel.
So he ends with a threat. The day Dalla's babe is burned, Gilly's babe dies too. Gilly is dismissed, but must be ready to leave before dawn. Sam then arrives, and Jon has him inspect the letter. It's to Tommen. Jon recalls pudgy Tommen sparring with Bran. Now the latter is dead while the former sits the Iron Throne. Sam reacts to this, but ultimately says nothing. Sam notes that the letter is unsigned. Jon doubts that they'll receive help. They've sided with Stannis and Tywin will give them nothing.
It's a bad look if little Tommen plays with his toys while Stannis rides to the Night's Watch's aid. And the letter contains nothing false. For Stannis' help, the Night's Watch has given Stannis food, shelter, and one castle. Despite that, the Night's Watch remains independent and unbiased. But Sam fears that Tywin might not see it this way, and he carries the strength of Highgarden beside him. If Tywin defeats Stannis, the fate of the Night's Watch could then be in jeopardy. Jon feels that if Stannis can only win White Harbour, he has a chance. Sam says if Stannis does not, a paper shield is better than none at all. Jon concedes and signs the letter.
Sam asks about the crying Gilly he passed on his way in. Jon says she was here to plead for Mance's life again. And speaking of Gilly, he's sending her and the babe away. Jon changes the subject to their enemy. He wants to know what Sam has learned of the others. Unfortunately, Sam has found little new useful information. There was some evidence that dragon steel was effective against the others. They both assume that means Valyrian steel. But he's confident if given enough time, he will find more information. Jon then breaks it to Sam. There's no more time. You are going with Gilly and Maester Aemon to Oldtown. Sam is to become a maester.
Sam balks at the idea. He can't. Blood makes him squeamish, and no Tarly can ever wear a chain of servitude. Again, Jon thinks to himself, kill the boy, in you and him. He tells Sam that he will go, and he'll be brave, or at very least hide his fears. He leaves on the morrow, and not to tell anyone. Sam flees without looking back, just as Gilly did. Jon is exhausted. He's been up half the night with Aemon writing letters and making plans. Before he retired to his bed, Aemon offered one final piece of advice. Kill the boy within you. It takes a man to rule.
We'll be right back.
Hello, friends. Are you ready to make some unforgettable memories? Well, if so, consider the Marriott Bonvoy program. Discover the perfect destination for your summer getaway and unlock exclusive deals on luxurious accommodations. With our affiliate partnership, you'll enjoy unbeatable savings and a seamless booking experience. Don't let summer slip away. Visit Marriott Bonvoy today and make this vacation season one for the books. Use our Ghosts of Harrenhal affiliate page to check it all out and buy Bonvoy points or give some as a gift. The link to our page is in the show notes. Later, while doing rounds, Jon learns that 2 of Stannis' knights rode south on the King's Road. Jon deduces they must be King's envoys, as free riders would suffice as scouts. He wonders what secrets Stannis is keeping from him. The next morning, Jon asks Ed to summon Bedwyck and Janos Slynt. He then says his goodbyes to Aemon, Gilly, and Sam. Gilly pleads with Jon to look after the baby as promised and not to name him until he's 2.
When he returns, Bedwyck, aka Giant, is waiting in his office. Jon informs him that he's planning to garrison Icemark and Greyguard. Jon is giving Bedwyck command of Ice Watch and its 30-man garrison. He is to refurbish the castle and watch for climbers on the wall. Jon means to establish a line of beacon towers along the top of the wall. It's a while before Slynt makes his appearance, and the man is surly from the start. When Jon offers him command of Greyguard and a 30-man garrison, Slynt outright rejects it with, "Keep your ruin, bastard. No traitor's son gives commands to me." With that, Slynt storms out.
The next morning, Jon finds Slynt sitting with his buddies, including Alliser Thorne, at breakfast. Jon offers him one last chance to obey his command. Slynt tells Jon to stick his command where the sun don't shine, and that Jon has the mark of the beast on him, much to the amusement of Alliser Thorne. Jon asks Iron Emmett to take Slynt to the wall and hang him.
The hall erupts in chaos. Thorne steps aside, letting the man escorting Slynt pass. Slynt kicks, screams, and threatens, but he is hauled into the yard. Jon shouts, "Stop!" He will not hang Slynt. With that, a smile creeps back across Slynt's face. That is, until Jon follows it up with a command for Ed to go get a block. Slynt continues his threats of Tywin Lannister's retaliation for this. However, once the man's head is placed on the block, his tune changes. "I will accept the command. I will go. I will go." Longclaw descends.
Oh boy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Descends rapidly. I was trying to think what if there was a word for rapid descent. Because
Right.
descends makes it sound a little bit slow, but it's coming down with force here, I think.
I would think so. It's a
Hmm.
sharp sword, but even
Yeah,
so, it
but
probably
you want to
requires some.
give it a swing. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Right. Yeah, I guess
A,
technically.
a Louisville Slugger doesn't hit home runs without you giving it some.
Right. Yeah.
Right, yeah.
I guess Longclaw descending could just mean he set the sword down too. But
He's just
was,
leaning on it.
Yeah.
It's been a morning, let me tell you. All right, so I think this is a really important chapter for Jon.
Sure.
I wrote the words "he's led a charmed life," but then I parenthesized it with "sort of" because he's had a lot go wrong too.
Oh yes, right.
But because of the charmed nature of his life, he does need to get to become a man off his own back and get rid of the childish things.
Right.
His flexing to prove himself Lord Commander, that was inevitable. And also, I think, weird that they didn't see it coming. So much so, and actually, there's an interesting point that I just noticed as we went through this the one last time. Thorne was totally in with Slynt on until someone was sent to take him away.
Yeah.
And then Thorne was like, wait a minute, I realize now that guy's disobeying a command from the Lord Commander. Let me just get out of the way of this.
What a fool. I'm not associated with that guy. Yeah, he was all fine and dandy to scheme behind, closed doors and back alleys. But when it's out in the open, Slynt's on his own. There's no defense of him. But yeah, I mean, I guess your statement about Jon's charmed life, it's all about perspective, right? I mean, compared to some small folk boy growing up, in some hovel somewhere, Jon leads a very charmed life. Compared to Tommen Baratheon, less so, I guess.
True enough.
Growing up with Catelyn Stark as your stepmother, probably he didn't feel very charmed for most of his life.
Exactly. But having a stepmother who doesn't love you is one thing. Having an awful life that ends with you being falsely accused of poaching and shipped off to the wall.
Right.
That's worse,
Yes, exactly. But yeah, you said it's an important chapter, and I agree. But it's also a really awful chapter for Jon because I believe he's a good man with a decent heart. And, when we left him in Sam 1 of A Feast for Crows, we could never expected how rough the next day would go for Jon. It's pretty brutal. He had to do some really difficult things.
Yes. Yes, it is the next day, right? Because the remainder of that day was spent telling Slynt and Bedwick that they had to do this, and it's the next day where he's actually doing the beheading. Right, yeah.
This is, so speaking of Sam 1 of A Feast for Crows, they're mirror chapters. This chapter and Sam 1, which is episode 231. I went back and read Sam 1, chapter 5 of A Feast for Crows, and you can see just how much these chapters parallel. Some of the conversations are exactly identical, down to the bleeding hand from the raven, Sam's bleeding hand, even the descriptions of shared scenes with Sam are identical in a lot of ways. They do, both of the chapters gloss over some description that's further described in the other chapter.
Right.
But for the most part, it's up until Sam and Gilly and Aemon depart.
Leave. Yeah,
it's just a different perspective, inside of each man's head. We notice it. The most obvious place we notice it here is when Jon says Bran's dead, and Sam reacts. In this chapter, Sam just makes kind of a face, but when we were in Sam's head, he was thinking, he's not dead, but I made a vow I made a promise not to say anything. So, and in the Sam chapter, Jon is kind of cold and mean with Sam, and it was pretty harsh. But here in the Jon chapter, we see that he's doing what he feels needs to be done based on the advice from Aemon to kill the boy in him.
Yeah. So as I said, I think it was inevitable that he was going to have to flex as Lord Commander, but it wasn't inevitable that he was going to have to treat Gilly and Sam this way. He could have convinced them to do this, but he didn't.
Possibly.
He ripped off the Band-Aid, potentially costing him friendships, and that's harsh, especially because he's sending them away. You know, I mean, like if they were sticking around, they could see it for what it was. But now all they're going to be left with is this bitter taste in their mouths. You know.
Right. Yeah. Well, I guess maybe once Sam realizes the reason why Gilly is so upset.
Yes.
Maybe he would understand why Jon had to do the things that he had to do in the way he did it, possibly.
Of course, I don't remember Gilly saying this to Sam, but there is something that Jon said to Gilly that I didn't know, and this could be my forgetfulness, or it could be because this is new information. But his threat to kill Gilly's baby is pretty stern.
Yes.
And that might colour Sam's view of things if Gilly recites the conversation she had with Jon.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we never were privy to that conversation, but not that it couldn't have happened, but we weren't privy to it.
Imagining myself in that situation, if I was Gilly and Sam were to say to me, Jon was just doing what he had to do as Lord Commander, I'd be like, well, let me just tell you something about your beloved Jon.
Yeah.
But, I would say, though, if I was Sam, I'd probably say he was bluffing.
Oh, yeah.
He wouldn't do that.
Right. Yeah.
You don't know. You weren't close to him, but I know for a fact he wouldn't do that.
Yeah, and I had that same thought, but I don't think it's a threat that Gilly would be willing to leave to chance anyway.
True. True.
But we got to see the conversation because in the Sam chapter, she came running out when he was going in, and through that whole chapter, we thought that their conversation had to do with her asking on Val's behalf to spare Mance, and it wasn't until now that we see that was not in fact true.
Well, even at the time, the only the credulous would believe what Jon was saying there,
Right.
Or at least those of us who knew where Gilly's story was going were like, I'm pretty sure that's not what she's crying about.
Yeah, right. And had they stuck around long enough to see how Slynt's fate went the next day, it would have even further been worried about his threat.
That's true. Yes, because he's a much tougher guy than I gave him credit for. Yes, good point. Yeah. I would say the one thing I think was missing from that scene is, and she sort of gets it, but I would just want, if I was Gilly, I would want some cast iron promises from Jon that he wouldn't let this happen. Because I won't let it happen. Well, why don't you not let it happen with the baby that you've got?
Right. I'm still not quite clear on what his plan to spare Gilly's baby from the flames is, because in this chapter we're in Jon's head, and when they're all leaving, Jon tells us through his thoughts that he couldn't tell those babies apart. He was just trusting that she was taking Dalla's boy, and his line is something like, anyone who didn't know them well enough wouldn't be able to tell them apart. So if that's the truth, then how can he be positive that Stannis and Melisandre won't just be like, well, I don't know. Yeah. You said this is Dalla's boy, so
it's a mouth to feed. Yeah. Interesting.
So
yeah.
It's not like there's DNA testing or fingerprinting or something,
Yeah. And you've posed the question, is the Night's Watch sort of set up to look after and raise a baby? I mean, I will say, given that he is, born north of the Wall, that he's only a few moons away from being weaned and therefore a man grown. So probably he could look after himself. But yeah, it's true. I mean, they don't have much in the way of creche facilities, you would imagine.
Right. Now, I mean, they could get a wet nurse. I'm sure they will, they can handle this baby stuff, but, what are they going to do when they've got a 5-year-old running around Castle Black, a toddler running around Castle Black? Mm-hmm. I wonder if possibly eventually he will be raised in Oldtown with an eye from, with Jon keeping an eye on how his upbringing is going. But Also, Gilly's fear is that they're going to turn this baby into a crow. And Jon says, when he's old enough, we'll tell him the truth. And if he wants to, he can seek you out. But I just wonder how accurate that is. I mean, will there be no pressure to join this cause that he's been raised in his whole life? I mean, that he'll be free to go? He could just walk away?
We'll be right back.
This episode is sponsored by Audible. To get a free audiobook, or 2 if you're an Amazon Prime member, go to our exclusive URL, audibletrial.com/ghostsharrenhal. You can find the link in our show notes.
I would think in normal times that would be quite difficult to resist, because he'd be the only non-brother of the Night's Watch at the Wall.
Right.
But if Stannis' army persists up here, then there's going to be a lot more mixing of brothers and non-brothers, and so
That's
he probably.
True.
I mean, I'm assuming there that this force stays around for 15 years, which seems very unlikely. But theoretically, while there is a mix of brothers and non-brothers working together, that might ease that. But I take your point for sure. Once it's just the Night's Watch again, Jon would really want to stress to him, look, I don't want you to do this until you've met your mother. Go meet your mother. Yeah, maybe. And then if you still want to come back, because he would be close with everyone,
Right. It would depend on what type. If he was the rebellious teenager type, maybe he would want to break away as soon as he could, or maybe he's the kind of, he'd be the kind of young man who he's lived his whole life in Castle Black and raised, with alongside these Night's Watch brothers, and just can't wait to join.
It feels to me like in the times of peace to come, he says, fingers crossed, that's what I would do. I would say, go visit your mother, spend time with her, get to know her, and then you'll always be welcome back here, and you can make your own decision there. Yeah,
I like that. But one detail that I noticed is that Jon doesn't have a ghost dream the night before he ends up executing Janos Slynt. And the description is that ghosts slept next to his bed that night. And I was like, well, good. I mean, how boring that would have been. Worgen ghosts sleeping next to you.
How do I look while I'm sleeping? Oh, now I know.
Right. Although, as I thought more about it, maybe it would have been for the best, because that was the night that he had the nightmare about taking the babies off of Gilly and ripping their heads off and switching their heads. So maybe it would have been like, I prefer whatever ghost is dreaming. He's gonna slip into your dream. Speaking of ghost, there's after Gilly leaves, I think it was, Jon notices that Ghost is sitting by the door and gnawing on a bone of some variety. And it made me think about how stable Ghost's life is compared to the rest of his siblings that are alive. And then that made me think, I wonder, he very well could be the largest and strongest of his siblings because of it.
Good point. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, he's mostly lives indoors when he needs to, and gets fed, doesn't have to hunt necessarily. Right. He's been through some hardships, but you're right. Right now, he's definitely more stable than everybody else. Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, Nymeria is doing pretty well as the leader of a huge pack in a place like the Riverlands, where there's a lot of prey, including humans, to prey on. Yeah. But Shaggy and Summer, we know for a fact that Summer is struggling to find food. Yeah. And last we saw of Shaggy, he was fighting some sort of huge goat that raked his side. So I don't know.
That's right. I'd forgotten about that. Yeah.
Ghost seems like and when you put it in perspective, Ghost seems like the pampered one.
Yeah, right. You're only biggest because you get fed. But yeah, Nymeria, I mean, she is the head of a big pack, and she's presumably doing well. But I mean, she lives out in the wild, right, and she's hunted and hated by humans.
True, very true.
She is willing to eat, I suppose. I'll say I have some sympathy for Sam because I myself considered medicine in my early life, but I decided I was too squeamish. I don't like the bloody parts of medicine.
Sure.
And so,
Yeah.
on the flip side, I think it's very strange that Sam cares so much still about his father's opinion. His father shipped him off to the wall.
Yeah. I think he would care less if Hornhill and Oldtown weren't so close. You know? If he were like a Vale Lord or something, he probably wouldn't think less.
Sam has always known. Sam has always known that he was cut out for being a maester. That was always, he was destined to be one. Really, I mean, ideally,
he was. Right.
His talents fit with it. So,
and they get to specialize. Like they get to make their own chains. That forge their own links. Do you have to go the route of learning medicine? I mean, you could specialize in other things.
Yeah. But probably Jon wants that because they want a medic at the
Yes, especially for a military force such as this.
Exactly.
Yeah. But I mean, we talked a lot about this part of the chapter in Sam 1 of A Feast for Crows, so we don't need to dwell on it too much. But I'll just say, I still don't quite get it because Jon says here in this chapter that he's planning on requesting more maesters. So if he's planning on doing that, why send Sam off to become one? It's going to be years of training, possibly a decade or more. How helpful will that be for the impending fight against the others? Unless they're thinking it's going to be 12 years from now. Maybe it will. Maybe he knows it was going to take so long between A Dance with Dragons and Winds of Winter that he thought, I got a full decade for you to go get trained up.
Well, the one thing there is, I wonder if some of it is Jon's fondness for Sam and knowing that Gilly was going to need support and Aemon was going to need support. And so he had to send someone with them.
Yeah, sure.
And doesn't really care if he comes back a maester or not, but wants to, well, that's an interesting thought.
Yeah.
We'll discuss it on the Discord server with brighter minds.
Yeah, let's do.
So I didn't recognize this, but you reminded me that the letter they're discussing signing and sending, we've seen this arrive and be opened.
Yeah, and reacted to.
Right.
Yes. We were with Cersei when she received that letter. We saw both hers and the small council's reaction.
Which is just hers, presumably.
Yes,
because the small council if she laughs, they laugh.
Yes, they discuss that the letter is disavowing helping Stannis, and that as you say, Cersei says, I think the actions are saying otherwise, and she says something like, the father gave Stannis the realm, the son gives him lands and castles.
Mm-hmm.
And then Grand Maester Pycelle and others suggest that they send no more men to the Night's Watch until Jon Snow is removed. But Qyburn, he had a better idea. He said, no, I think we should do the exact opposite. Let's send men, ostensibly to take the Black, to show that King Tommen does not ignore pleas for help. Stannis isn't the only one helping out here. But secretly, those men are there to remove Jon, and Cersei loves the idea and says, "I'll take it from here. Don't worry about that." And that's when
Osney Kettleblack.
Yes, that's when she
Yes.
proposes that whole thing to Osney. Bed Marjorie, get sent to the wall, kill Jon, we'll pardon you, and then you can come back and be my concubine. So, all stemming from this letter here.
Wow. Who knew what Jon was signing his name to?
Right.
So Jon believes that Stannis has a chance of succeeding if he can win over White Harbour. But we know what's going to happen at White Harbour?
Yes. Well, we know what they were told in King's Landing.
Cersei was told, right.
That Davos was... They took Davos captive, and then Wyman said, what do you want me to do with them? And Cersei and the small council said, kill him and we'll give you your son and heir Willis back. So that was the exchange.
Yeah. And a short-fingered body was presented.
Right, and yeah, exactly. And news of that capture arrived in the same chapter as this letter arrived. That all happened
Right.
I can't recall which Cersei it was off the top of my head, but...
So what do we make of these two knights heading south? Their names were Richard Horpe and Justin Massey. Their names didn't mean much to me. Are they deserters? That seems unlikely. Are they on a mission? Because John makes the point that they're not just scouts because they wouldn't send knights to be scouts.
Right, yeah.
For whom are they on a mission? Come on, Mackelly, give me your towering insight.
Well, it certainly seems like they are on a mission for Stannis in some regard. He did say they were Queensmen, so it could have been from Melisandre.
That's actually why I was asking. Yes, was it? Yeah. Could they conceivably be on a mission for somebody other than Stannis?
Yeah, possibly. I mean, we don't know why they're riding south. And, John admits Stannis is under no obligation to tell me. I've got my own secrets, including the baby I just sent away.
Right.
It's possible it could just be that Stannis received a raven from a lord willing to consider bending the knee. And so he sent these envoys to,
right.
to
I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that in spoilers, you're going to tell me something that you're holding back right now.
Oh, we'll have to see, I guess.
Okay, we'll find out.
But it's rare that George Martin would add such a detail without there being some sort of reason or payoff or something.
True enough.
But the reason could be as simple as to show that Stannis is still working on winning the North. That he's not just sitting idly by.
That's a part of it, yeah. I'm going to take a guess. And you know me, it's never memory, it's always a guess.
Right.
That he has got word from White Harbour that things haven't gone the way he wants, and they are going to entreat with White Harbour to say, do not do anything to Davos Seaworth.
That's that's a good conjecture. I like it.
Okay. So they're going to garrison the castles Icemark and Greyguard with Bedwick and Janos Slynt no longer.
Right.
Why those two castles? Is there a reason for those two castles? What makes them optimal?
Yeah, well,
they have cool names.
Yeah, they do. In my opinion, it doesn't. I mean, okay, so I'll just tell. So Icemark is located one castle west of the Night Fort, which has been given to Stannis. That's, the one castle that John admitted we gave Stannis. But on the Fist of the First Men, Qhorin Halfhand listed Icemark as a possible castle to regarrison, along with Stone Door and Deep Lake, to basically do the same thing that John is planning here, to defend against a wildling army and keep an eye on climbers.
So Icemark makes sense. Qhorin Halfhand suggested it. Check.
Right.
But it is right next door to a castle that you are now planning to occupy that Qhorin Halfhand had no idea you were planning to occupy.
Right. Yes. It's right. I mean, not right next to it, but it's the next castle west of the Night Fort. But the reason that Qhorin Halfhand mentioned Icemark at the time is because it was one of the lesser, as far as being in ruins, specifically compared to Greyguard, which is the castle he was trying to give Slynt command of.
That's why he wanted Slynt to know that, so that Slynt would refuse the order so he could chop his head off.
Maybe. Wow, he was playing some good chess right there, thinking that many steps ahead.
All right, who wants to be commander of, not Greyguard, obviously. Silly.
I wondered if maybe he chose that castle and chose Slynt to be the commander because it was so dilapidated.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, because he'd be too busy to cause trouble.
Yes, not just as a slap in the face.
Right, yeah. Because Stone Door, which is one of the castles that Qhorin Halfhand and Mormont were discussing way back on the Fist of the First Men, is right next door. And that's the one that Mormont and Qhorin decided on because it's in better shape. Mm-hmm. So
I would love it if Janos Slynt with his head on the block was like, okay, I'll do Stone Door. Stone Door.
It's in way better shape. But here's the thing, though. So Greyguard is 3 castles west of Icemark and 2 east of the Shadow Tower. So both of the castles that are being talked about, well, all 3 if you include the Night Fort, are west
same
of
side
Castle
of
Black.
Castle Black. Yeah.
So no castles between Castle Black and Eastwatch, and I couldn't off the top of my head, and I couldn't think of a way to research it if there was a reason for that. And Jon says he wants to establish a beacon alert system on the top of the wall between the castles, which is better than nothing, but it's not very effective if an attack happens between Castle Black and Eastwatch. There's the torch system is going to end at Castle Black because there's way too much of a gap between Castle Black and Eastwatch. So,
yep, don't know. Interesting. So Bedwick, who's also known as Giant, looks like a good choice for running Icemark. He's tough, grizzled, respected, but like many of the Night's Watch, he's grown into it after arriving in disgrace, and that's why this is always going to create challenges with working with non-members of the Night's Watch, because he's going to be giving commands to people who are higher born and higher respected. Right. But he does seem like a good choice. Despite his punitive size. That's the wrong word. Despite his puny size, because he is in fact, Giant is in fact sarcastic. He's like the shortest member of the Night's Watch.
Yes, I was going to say that that Stannis' men would be looking down their nose at him, but they really will be looking down on him. But yeah, he's got the credentials. He's been a ranger for 12 years. He survived the Fist of the First Men and the mutiny at Craster's. I almost said Casters. He stayed loyal. He didn't take part in the mutiny. He returned to Castle Black. So, of the men he's got left, Giant is as good as he's got. Yeah, he can't read or write, aside from, he said, I think he said he could write his own name on a good day. But, that's why Jon's asking for more maesters.
Yeah, you definitely need to come up with some kind of system, though, because you need to get commands to him, so you need to come up with some system, or at least have one person who could read or write in the garrison, because otherwise it would be a real pain.
Good point.
So Janos Slynt might have made himself a useful commander at Greyguard, I think. Bedwick has concerns about him, but Jon's right. Slynt must have learned a thing or two about command, even if he did get to where he got through climbing the greasy pole rather than any actual innate talent.
Sure, right, yeah.
So he's another example of a man who had a chance to sort of develop in the Night's Watch, who did not take it.
No, I think he was too corrupt at this point.
Probably. But I mean, the rapists and murderers don't come in the greatest of,
That's true.
They can make a career, make a life.
You're right, yeah. Now, Jon is struggling with feeling any sort of brotherhood with Slynt in this chapter. He reminds us that Slynt helped to slay his father and did his best to kill Jon. Slynt was part of the execution of Ned, and he picked up Ned's head after it was severed and displayed it to the crowd. And when he and Alistair Thorne arrived at Castle Black after Jon and the others basically performed miracles to keep the forces from overtaking Castle Black on both sides of the wall. Mm-hmm. He tried to have Jon executed as a traitor. Aemon managed to stop it, and then Jon was sent to assassinate Mance, expecting that he would die. So that's what he's talking about. But I can understand why it would be hard for him to feel any brotherly love for this man.
Well, true enough. Yes. Yes. Giving him a golden opportunity to show insubordination, where the penalty for insubordination is beheading, is very smart. Keep doing it. Keep giving him orders until he's insubordinate. Right. But on that subject, and the only reason this is not in pedantry is because it's a character choice, Janos' insubordination is bonkers. It's crazy. Beheading seems harsh to our ears, to our standards, but given the standards of the day, it was the only possible outcome. Yeah, that Slynt and Thorne couldn't see it, or Slynt couldn't see it. Thorne apparently could see it the moment it started to happen.
Like, this was the inevitable conclusion to what we've been doing.
But that makes me wonder, was it like, you know what, I'll get this idiot to do this.
Maybe.
But he's lost an ally by doing it.
Right,
Yeah, I don't know. It seems to me, if you want to test a new young Lord Commander who you disagree that he should be in the role, you do it with smaller acts of rebellion and annoyance. things that, if he were to react the same way to those, he would look like a terrible Lord Commander.
Yeah, you don't outright refuse a command.
Exactly. In
Especially
front of
a
everyone.
Command, right, and a command of this magnitude. It's not like he said, pick up your dirty socks,
Right. Yeah. And now I'm curious. So I'm curious what Thorne's thinking was, but I'm also curious. Remember, we will get a Thorne POV one of these days. But what effect this will have on Thorne? Because on some levels, I could see this making Thorne go, you know what? I might have underestimated that kid. I am going to toe the line from here forward. But equally, it could be like, that kid's now really got it in for me. I was laughing along with Slynt right up until he got his head cut off. Maybe I should conspire against him even more than I already was.
Yeah, sure. It's kind of in some ways the exact opposite of Jon's rationale for executing Slynt. Is he's just going to keep at it until he gets me,
Right.
I'm going to keep having to look over my shoulder until he finally wins and gets me. No, I mean, like you said at the beginning of our discussion, Thorne was brave enough to secretly conspire with Slynt, but when push came to shove, there was no fight. He stood aside and let them take him without a word or any kind of motion of help. But, as far as how the effect this might have on Thorne, I think your assessment is spot on. It makes a lot of sense. But there's others members.
To be fair, my assessment is it could do one of two completely polar opposite things.
And I think both of those are very realistic possibilities.
Okay.
But there's other experienced
really hedging
members.
my bets.
There's other experienced members of the Night's Watch as well, such as Bowen Marsh, who seemed relieved. He made an audible statement when Jon said, "Stop, I'm not going to hang him." He said something like, "Oh, thank the seven," or something along those lines. So how is someone like Bowen Marsh going to react to this? Someone who's seasoned, long-term, high standing. He's the Lord Steward, and he was swayed by Slynt and Thorne to withdraw his name for Lord Commander and to back Slynt. So.
I honestly think any member, and this is why I think Thorne backed down so quickly, any member of the Night's Watch understands what the penalty is for that kind of refusal to follow orders, and he's not going to hold it against Jon at all.
Hopefully, yeah.
That's my thinking.
If he does disagree with the execution, it could cause problems for Jon to have someone that well respected in that long term of a member against him.
Yeah, and to be honest, the only argument, and if I was one of the senior people, I would not make this argument, was that it was entrapment in the sense that he was giving him a crappy assignment in the hope that he would refuse.
Do you think it was in the hope? Do you think he was hoping?
No, I don't think that. I think he was just giving him an assignment and he expected him to refuse.
You think he did expect him to refuse?
Yeah.
Huh. I thought he was hoping to give Slynt something to do, give him a thimble of power somewhere far away from Alliser Thorne and Jon.
Okay, let me rephrase. I think he hoped that that's what the outcome would be, but he expected the outcome to be what it was.
Okay, yeah,
that would be my guess.
I could see where you're coming from.
The other little bit, so he may be losing some allies. Well, he's not really losing allies. He's cementing enemies within the ranks of the Night's Watch. But he is also creating more of a bond with Stannis. Stannis oversaw the execution and gave Jon a little nod of approval for his cold-handed actions.
Right. Mr. Laws are made of iron.
Exactly. He'll like that kind of thing. Yeah.
I'm not sure whether that's a good thing or a bad thing for Jon, but...
it's not ideal. Yeah. All right, that's excellent. What about some spoilers? Remember, if you join us in our Buy Me a Coffee Sustainer tiers at the higher levels, you get the spoilers. All right, excellent. Good spoilers. Thank you, sir. How about some background?
All right. Well, so Jon asked Ed Tullett to wake him.
If you will, it's time for background.
Yes, right. The hour of the background. So Jon asks Ed Tullett to wake him at the hour of the wolf the morning that Sam and Gilly and Aemon left. And there are several other named nighttime hours in Westeros, and they include the hour of the bat, hour of the eel, hour of ghosts, the hour of the owl, the hour of the wolf, as I mentioned, and the hour of the nightingale. And some behind-the-scenes context suggests that the hour of the ghosts, or not the ghosts, it's actually hour of ghosts, could correlate to the witching hour, which is usually considered midnight.
I would say so.
Yeah. So using info and context from the material, a wiki of Ice and Fire makes the following conjectures regarding a correlation between Westerosi named hours and our hours. Did I separate the word hour enough there? Okay. Yeah. All right. So 10 p.m., they're thinking is the hour of the bat. The hour of the eel being 11 p.m., like we said. The hour of ghosts, midnight. The hour of the owl, 1 a.m. The hour of the wolf, 3 a.m. The hour of the nightingale, 5 a.m. And the hour of the nightingale, which, is 5 a.m. possibly, might be when around the time when nightingales sing, as they're known to sing about an hour before sunrise.
Wow, that's really interesting. I'd never really noticed these named hours. I mean, you see it. Someone says the hour of the wolf bounces off you.
Yeah,
that's very interesting. Thanks.
Yeah, thought it was pretty cool.
Comparison with the television show, the parts that had already happened were kept, apart from the baby swap, which obviously didn't happen in the show. The Janos Slynt part is collapsed down to a single scene. He's not given the night to reconsider his refusal. He's immediately dragged outside and beheaded. I don't think they even mention the possibility of hanging. It all happens in one fell swoop, if you will.
If you will.
Pedantry corner. So I've mentioned it, but if I were Gilly, I would want a written in blood contract that the roost would only be maintained long enough to see her away. Like, as soon as she's on board that ship, Jon would loudly announce that the baby switch had happened and this was not Dalla's baby anymore.
He would say, wait, what? This isn't Dalla's baby? It says Gilly, property of Gilly, right on the shoulder there.
One of those little plastic wristbands.
Right, yeah. No, I know what you mean. I think maybe if Gilly were, a true lady of Westeros, like a Catelyn Stark or a Cersei Lannister, she might have the gumption and, the fortitude to, what's the right word that I'm looking for? The latitude, the entitlement, whatever,
the agency.
to make such a request. But the Craster's women were pretty well kept down, so I don't know if it's in her to think about fighting.
Yeah,
back.
True enough. The other thing, I mean, we're in pedantry, so this is not really a pedantry discussion, but it kind of is. Was there any point? I felt like in the last Jon chapter, he made the point that the king north of the wall's child was not royal. There was no hereditariness north of the wall, and I felt like Melisandre was like, "You got a point." Yeah. Now, when the chips are down, she might set that point aside, but it just feels like it is pretty drastic what they've done, and it is heartbreaking for Gilly.
Absolutely. And you're right, he did make that argument, and it did seem like at least Melisandre was listening to the idea. I mean, all they have to do is... In Jon 1, we learned that Stannis is frequently bringing in wildlings to talk with them. So, to get information from them. You might learn the way of their culture.
When we kill Mance, who's in charge? Then no one's going to say the baby.
Right.
And is that because it's Gilly's baby? No, because it's a baby.
Right, yeah. And, Jon has theoretically king's blood in him as well, if he considers Robb Stark to have made a claim. I mean, he's considering Mance Rayder to have made a claim to be king and therefore having king's blood. So how's that any different than Robb Stark claiming to be king? And, Jon shares blood with Robb Stark as well.
Lock solid logic there, my friend. Can't find any flaws in that. All right, let's do news and notes.
All right. Well, so the new House of the Dragon Funko Pops have been announced. And with filming on House of the Dragon set to begin in a few weeks, but no new episodes to watch until 2026, you can at least indulge Nope, that's not right. Indulge your dragon riding needs with this new collection of Westerosi figurines. We've got Alicent Hightower wearing a blue dress, I believe in the existing Funko Pop. She's got that green dress that was famous.
Would make a certain amount of sense, yeah.
Yes. They've got Rhaenyra in a shiny dress. I think both dresses are modeled after the dresses the two were wearing when they met at the end of season 2.
Okay.
I believe. Mysaria will make her first appearance as a Funko Pop, as will Alice Rivers.
Exciting.
And we've got Daemon Targaryen wielding his sword and his brother King Aegon II in, I'm sure, some cool pose. I don't actually know what that one will look like, but pre-sales are available now, with orders being filled in June.
All right.
Of 2025. So if you're listening to this 3 years from now, you can go to the store and buy it.
Just go buy it. And as I mentioned, as I spoiled earlier on, we had a really fun Sustainer call last night. We had a good crowd, and
we did.
We ran out of time. That thing has a hard stop, and I like to sing before the end.
Yes,
I do not like to sing before the end.
It's always the weirdest timing. You're just gearing up to sing, right?
Yeah, because I watch the clock very carefully and make sure I don't actually sing.
Did you see a clock? I didn't see a clock yesterday.
By default, you don't see a clock, but if you sort of change the frame of your window, the clock is hiding up there. I knew we were getting close, but we just got cut off. But yeah, so good, so nice. People, we've gathered kindred spirits, Mackelly.
Yes,
I think of us as kind of nice guys, and we've gathered really nice people to talk to about.
We sure have, and our Discord community is a really welcoming, encouraging, positive place too. And I'm really proud of the community that we've built. And, last night was a great example. You texted me afterward and said that was a fantastic call. So
I know. And you know me, I'm usually a bit of a misery guts about these things, but I was on a high from it. It was so much fun.
It was.
It's a little bit scary because, we're meeting people we don't know, in a video chat, and they're there to be entertained,
Right, yeah. There's just a little pressure on us to
just a tiny bit,
make it worth their while, especially when people call either, from other continents, super early in the morning or super late at night. And, we don't want them thinking, why did I get up at 6 o'clock in the morning for this?
Right. All right, let's conclude this one. So I would say Jon has pretty thoroughly killed the boy, and the man has been born, and the man is a bit more of a badass than the boy was.
Yeah, he had a heavy dose of challenges of rule in this chapter. Separate a mother and child, send a best friend away against his will, and kill a man for disobedience. So, it's a rough few days.
Yeah. I mean, it's also sort of isolating, when you send away your friends and execute your enemies. I hope he's got some kind of nice peaceful hobby he can retire to in the evenings, because
some knitting or something like that.
Yes, he's not going to be actually, knitting's a great choice for the wall.
Yeah, right. They should all take up that hobby.
But yeah, it's a dark path ahead of him now in terms of friendship and levity in his life.
For sure. Yeah. But someone who doesn't have much of a path left is Slynt, who met a bloody end. And really, who could have seen that coming?
Perhaps he has a path that was left behind as they dragged his corpse across the courtyard. That was the path.
Yeah, right, maybe. Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly not surprised that Slynt didn't go peacefully with a loving family all around. Well, he did have brothers around him. I'm not sure how loving the scene was, but
they were holding him down.
Right. But I wonder how much of Jon's decision to execute Slynt, how much of it was these three things: Jon realizing that Slynt was always going to be a dangerous person to him and someone he would have to keep an eye on at all times, and would always be trying to undercut him. And
okay, I've got number one.
Yeah, and he even made a comment about it when Giant said, "Yeah, you could make him commander of Greyguard, or you could send him to help Three-Fingered Hob cut turnips. And Jon thought, well, if that was the case, I'd never eat another turnip here again, you know. Okay, so that's one. Jon showing the rest of his brothers that they better fall in line. I might be young, but I'm to be taken seriously, you know.
Got two.
And third, retribution for his role in Ned's death and the attempt to execute Jon himself when he first arrived at the Wall.
I'm going to say all number two.
All number
100%, 100% number two. But he was always aware of 1 and 3 while he was thinking about this.
Yeah.
Because you can't allow insubordination. I mean, like, you just
agreed.
Can't. Because he would never be a Lord Commander if he allowed that to happen.
Yeah. And
might he have spared him if he recanted? Yes, that's where number 3 comes in, because he's like, it's not going to hurt me to chop your head off because of what you've done to my family.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. When in the moment when he says, take him to the Wall, and then there's the pause, and there's like, you know, George Martin puts in these descriptions of other things that he could say, you know, throw him in an ice cell or tie him to his horse. But then he keeps thinking when he gets out of the ice cell, he's going to go right back to, you know, trying to cut my legs out from under me. When, you know, and that's when he says, hang him, because he comes to the realization, no matter what, this guy's always got it out for me. And there's only one way to end it.
And so we're in this weird time where we would normally be wishing Gilly, Sam, and Aemon having a safe journey, but we already know what happened to them, and they didn't have a universally safe journey. But
no, unfortunately.
And next week we're straight back to Essos for Tyrion's Viking River cruise down the Rhine.
I'm sure that's exactly. I'm sure it will be luxury accommodations and
exactly. Yeah. Well. In the meantime, there's 3 ways that you can help us. You could leave us a positive review and a 5-star rating. You could buy us a cup of Arbor Gold at buymeacoffee.com/ghostharrenhall. There you can join us at any of our sustainer levels. There's a tier to match your budget and interest. And if you join at the upper tiers, you get the spoilers, which is always interesting. And you could just make a donation directly to our cause at our website, ghostsofharrenhall.buzzsprout.com.
And if you're looking for more ways to interact with us, well, first off, you could send us a text. The link is at the top of every episode show notes. Just keep in mind we have no means of responding, but we do enjoy reading them. And if you're interested in keeping up on the latest Ghosts and Harrenhal news and developments, well, I suggest you check us out on our social media. You can follow us on Twitter at Ghost Harrenhal. We're on Facebook, Instagram. We always have a great time on Discord and YouTube.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.